The first time I realized the ground beneath me was shifting wasn't when my name was missing from the monthly client report. It wasn't even when the executive assistant, who I had trained, suddenly started leaving me off calendar invites. No, the real moment hit like a cold slap when I walked into the boardroom for a Monday briefing and found him, the CEO's son, Adam, sitting in my chair, legs sprawled out, snapping a selfie with his phone angled high. All mine soon. He typed with a smirk, hitting post before I even set down my coffee. The room chuckled nervously, no one daring to correct him. That chair wasn't just leather and armrests. It represented 15 years of loyalty, sleepless nights during crises, and deals brokered with the kind of precision only experience earns. And here he was, treating it like a prop for his Instagram followers. I didn't flinch. Not in front of him. Not in front of the board. Instead, I did what I'd learned over years of surviving corporate storms. I smiled. A small, quiet smile that gave nothing away. Because if there's one thing you learn in this world, it's that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. For context, I had built my career at this firm from the ground up. No nepotism, no golden parachutes, just grit and hours that bled into weekends. I had seen CEOs come and go, mergers rise and collapse, and I'd been the quiet anchor who kept everything steady. I didn't play politics. I didn't chase the spotlight. I believed, maybe naively, that results would always outweigh noise. But results, I was learning, didn't trend on social media. Adam wasn't hired, he was installed. Fresh from some overpriced MBA program he barely scraped through, armed with buzzwords he didn't understand, and a last name that excused every failure. He'd been at the firm less than 6 months and already strutted through the hallways like a crowned prince. And the CEO, his father, let it happen. I became Legacy Kelly. A polite nod in meetings, a hand wave in the background, like a fax machine humming in the corner. Not broken, but irrelevant. I should have felt anger. Maybe I did, deep down. But what I really felt was something sharper. Awareness. Awareness that arrogance never walks alone. It always drags carelessness behind it. And I knew how to watch. How to wait. How to listen. Now, pause here for a quick second. Because this is where people usually ask me, Kelly, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you storm into the CEO's office and demand respect? And the answer is simple. Because silence is sometimes louder than shouting. Because the moment you thrash, they label you emotional, unstable, replaceable. But if you sit, still and patient, you see things others miss. And I did see things. Adam loved to flaunt power he didn't understand. He paraded through the office making promises he couldn't keep. Innovations that were just copy-paste ideas stolen from staff decks. Clients he assumed would stay loyal because of his last name. Every time he swaggered, he left a trail of missteps. Emails out of order, protocols skipped, conversations documented by people who weren't as loyal to him as he thought. I collected it all. Quietly. Not maliciously. Precisely. Because when you've given 15 years of your life to something, you don't walk out the moment a spoiled prince sits in your chair. You wait until the cards are on the table. The chair wasn't the breaking point. The selfie wasn't even the breaking point. It was the caption. All mine soon. He wasn't just mocking me. He was declaring war on everything I'd built, everything I'd protected. And the tragic part? He didn't even realize how dangerous that was for him. See, this firm wasn't just a company. It was a fortress of contracts, compliance, and federal filings that had to be handled with surgical precision. You couldn't swagger your way through a merger. You couldn't Instagram your way out of fiduciary duty. But Adam didn't know that. His father, drunk on pride, ignored it. And the rest of the staff? They were too afraid to whisper. Except me. Because while Adam thought the throne was waiting for him, he didn't realize there was still one piece of paper, signed and sealed, that no one had bothered to undo. And that piece of paper? It meant that the throne wasn't his to take. It was still mine. So when Adam leaned back in my chair, captioned, "All mine soon," and the interns laughed nervously, I didn't argue. I didn't rage. I didn't tell him that his little performance was about to cost him more than he could imagine. I just sat down at the edge of the table, pulled out my phone, and forwarded a single email. One that didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't threaten. Just 4 lines, quiet as a whisper. 10 minutes later, the firm's lawyer stormed into the boardroom, face pale as paper, phone shaking in his hand. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Adam. He walked straight to the CEO, leaned down, and slid the phone across the polished table. The CEO read. His eyes widened. His jaw locked. Then he shouted so loud the glass trembled. "Caller, now." I didn't move. I just smiled into my coffee. Because this wasn't the beginning of my downfall. This was the beginning of theirs. The CEO's voice echoed in that boardroom long after the lawyer slipped the phone into his pocket. "Caller, now." No one moved. Not the partners, not the assistants taking fake notes on their iPads, not even Adam, who had suddenly stopped smirking. The only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the clicking of Adam's pen. Click, 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 like a nervous tell. I didn't move either. That's the thing about silence. It terrifies people who thrive on noise. Adam finally broke the tension. "Dad, it's fine. She's just bitter. She doesn't matter." His laugh was thin, forced, like he didn't believe his own words. The CEO didn't answer. He just glared at me, then at Adam, then back to the lawyer. The lawyer leaned closer, whispered something in his ear, and the color drained from his face. That was my cue. I gathered my notebook and coffee, nodded politely, and slipped out. I didn't need to hear the yelling that would follow. I didn't need to stay for the explanations, the excuses, or the scrambling, because I already knew how this game was played, and how it would end. For anyone listening, wondering what was in that email, let me back up. 6 months earlier, during a messy internal scandal, the board had voted me as interim managing partner. Not because they loved me, but because I was the only one they trusted not to sink the ship. There was paperwork, filings with the regulators, signatures from every partner. The kind of official documents you don't just misplace. And while the scandal faded, no one ever officially reversed that vote. Which meant, on paper, in the eyes of the law and the regulators, I still had more authority than Adam, than half the board, maybe even more than the CEO himself. The firm had tried to erase me with office politics, but they forgot the one place you can't erase someone: in legal filings. And that was the email I'd forwarded. Not a rant, not an angry resignation, just proof. 4 neat lines and 2 attachments. Quiet, precise, nuclear. Back at my desk, a desk they'd already downgraded to a windowless cubicle wedged beside the HR coordinator, I sat down and let the murmurs float through the hallway. I could feel the ripple even before I heard it. Doors closing, voices rising, calls being made. The kind of panic you can smell, like smoke from a fire no one wants to admit exists. Adam stormed past my cubicle 20 minutes later, his face blotchy red. He didn't look at me, but I heard him mutter into his phone. "She's lying. It doesn't mean anything. Fix it." Fix it. That's the arrogance of people who've never built anything themselves. They think rules bend, signatures vanish, and truth evaporates if you just fix it. But some things can't be fixed with a phone call. Some things are bigger than Instagram captions and LinkedIn posts. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of cheap wine. My cat, a lazy old tabby, curled up beside me while I pulled out the folder I'd started keeping the moment Adam arrived. It wasn't revenge. At least not at first. It was insurance. Insurance against exactly this. Inside were copies of emails he'd ignored, protocols he'd skipped, compliance deadlines he'd treated like optional suggestions. I had notes from meetings where he promised clients returns that weren't even possible. Half-baked strategies that violated basic financial laws. None of it malicious. All of it reckless. And recklessness has consequences. As I sat there flipping through the papers, I thought about the 15 years I'd given this firm. The nights I stayed past midnight to reconcile margins, the weekends I sacrificed, the vacations I skipped, all for loyalty, for stability, for a paycheck that was never extravagant but steady, and in return, a chair stolen by a boy who'd never sweated for anything in his life. The message of this chapter of my life was sharp, simple, and brutal. Some people inherit thrones they don't deserve, but a crown built on arrogance is a crown that always slips. The next morning, the firm was buzzing like a disturbed hive. I walked in with my coffee as usual, calm, silent, invisible. But the whispers followed me down the hallway. Partners on their phones, assistants rushing, compliance officers pale and sweaty. Adam wasn't in his chair that morning. The CEO wasn't either. By noon, I heard the first rumor. The regulators had been contacted. By 2 the second, clients were already asking questions. And by 5 o'clock, the one that made me smile into my lukewarm coffee. The merger they'd been celebrating for months was now on hold. Because of me. Or rather, because of a mistake they made when they underestimated me. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I didn't even post. I just fed my cat, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Because this was only the beginning. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's paperwork. The next few days felt like living inside a pressure cooker. You could almost hear the walls of the firm groaning under the weight of secrets no one wanted to acknowledge. On the surface, everything looked polished. Receptionists smiled. Emails went out. The stock ticker screens in the lobby kept flashing in corporate blue. But underneath? The air was thick with panic. By Wednesday, 3 separate people accidentally bumped into me near the elevators, junior associates I'd mentored years ago, each whispering the same thing. "Kelly, what's happening? Are we in trouble?" I just smiled and told them to keep doing their jobs, because that's what everyone needed to hear. But the truth? Yes, the firm was in trouble. Serious trouble, not because of me, but because of what arrogance does when it's left unchecked. Adam had continued to strut around as if nothing had changed, posting selfies, talking loudly in the cafeteria about new directions, bragging that he was redefining leadership. But the interns had stopped liking his posts. The staff had stopped laughing at his jokes. And the partners, they had started locking their doors when he walked past. That's when the cracks began to show. The first call came from Charles, one of our longest-standing clients. Old money, the kind of man who still signed checks by hand. He had been with the firm since before I joined. He trusted me. He never trusted Adam. I overheard the end of the conversation as Adam slammed his office door, red-faced and sweating. "What do you mean you're transferring funds?" He barked into the phone. "You can't just pull out, Charles. We're mid-merger." Silence. Then Adam's voice dropped to a whisper. No, she doesn't run things anymore. That's ancient history. I'm in charge now." But his voice cracked on the word charge. Even he didn't believe it. I knew then what Charles had asked. Clients don't care about boardroom gossip. They care about signatures. And on paper, my name was still there. Not his. Not even his father's. Mine. Later that afternoon, the firm's lawyer cornered me in the hallway. His tie was crooked, his phone buzzing endlessly in his hand. "Kelly," he muttered, voice low. "Do you realize what you've done?" I raised an eyebrow. "I sent an email, that's all." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That email froze half our operations. Until the board formally resolves your authority, every deal Adams touched could be invalid. Clients are already spooked. Regulators are circling. Do you want this firm to collapse?" I looked him dead in the eye. Do I want it to collapse? Number, but I won't be erased. Not after 15 years. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a resigned shake of his head, he muttered, "You're not the problem, Kelly." "They are." And he walked away. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment and sat at my kitchen table, the same place I drafted that first email. My cat jumped up beside me, demanding attention, but I was lost in thought. I thought about the people in that firm, the young analysts who stayed late, the assistants who kept everything glued together, the clients who had trusted us with their livelihoods. They deserved better than Adam, better than the CEO who thought nepotism could be disguised as vision. And here was the cruel irony. I wasn't trying to burn it all down. I was just trying to be recognized, to be respected for what I had actually done. But in their blindness, they had set fire to themselves. The next morning, the CEO finally returned from his conference. I say conference, because everyone knew it was a golf retreat in Florida. He stormed through the building like a man rehearsing authority he no longer had. When he reached my cubicle, my windowless, humiliating cubicle, he didn't even lower his voice. "Kelly," he snapped, "we need to talk, now." I followed him into his office. Adam was already there, arms crossed, trying to look powerful but looking more like a child caught stealing cookies. The CEO shut the door and leaned across the desk. "You're putting us in a dangerous position. That paperwork, whatever you think it means, it's technical, symbolic. You were interim, nothing more. That doesn't make you managing partner." I kept my voice calm. "Then show me the reversal. Show me the filing where the vote was undone." Silence. Adam shifted uncomfortably. The CEO's face tightened. "There isn't one, is there?" I said softly. He slammed his fist on the desk. "This is bigger than you, Kelly. You're risking hundreds of millions." I met his fury with a steady gaze. "Number you risked it the day you put your son in charge of clients he wasn't qualified to speak to. All I did was remind the world of the truth." His phone buzzed violently on the desk. He glanced down, eyes widening, then shoved it aside without answering. Adam's voice broke the silence. "Dad, don't let her win. She's nothing. She's infrastructure." I almost laughed at the word. Infrastructure. The same word his father had once used, as if stability were an insult. I stood, smoothing my jacket. "Infrastructure keeps buildings standing. You'd do well to remember that." And then I left, because I knew something they didn't. The regulators were already moving. And when regulators move, no amount of shouting can stop them. By Friday morning, the building felt thinner. The receptionist's smile was tight, the kind you hold when you're bracing for a wave. It had posted a banner on everyone's screens overnight. "Temporary controls in effect. New commitments require legal pre-clearance." That sounds routine if you've never worked in finance. It isn't. It means the adults have taken the keys away. I swiped my badge. It beeped, slow and reluctant, before the light flashed green. Down the hall, Adam tried his. No beep. He laughed too loudly and waited for someone to let him in. No one did. At 9:12 a.m., an email hit my inbox from our outside counsel. Subject line, "Authority clarification. Urgent." The body was polite and surgical. A request to meet immediately to discuss interim control during the merger review window and a potential consent and ratification. In plain English, they wanted me to bless what had been done without me. I didn't respond right away. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and watched the hallway. People were walking faster. Phones were glued to ears. Compliance had set up in Conference B like a triage tent. Stacks of binders, someone printing org charts in real time, highlighters everywhere. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the conference room. Outside counsel, gray suit, no nonsense, stood to shake my hand. Our in-house lawyer looked like he'd slept in his clothes. The CEO sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched. Adam was in the corner, staring at his phone like it owed him an apology. Counsel started. "Kelly, thank you for coming. We'd like to resolve the ambiguity around officer authority. The cleanest path is a limited ratification. Board signs, you acknowledge. We file an ADV amendment today. That would stabilize counterparties and the merger team." I kept my voice even. "Acknowledge what exactly?" "That you were acting in April," he said, measured. "And that since then, executive authority transitioned in practice. The board will formalize it retroactively. Retroactively. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. The transition in practice, I said, included my office being moved to a cubicle and my name scrubbed from files. That's not governance. That's erasure. Show me the minutes that transferred control. Show me the vote. Silence. Paper rustled. The CEO cleared his throat. Kelly, this is bigger than ego. Clients are nervous. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. An email preview flashed from a client I'd onboarded a decade ago. Maya Anand, CFO of a family office. We noticed conflicting signatories on recent communications. Until clarified, we're suspending any new instructions. Please advise who holds authority. I placed the phone face down. They're not nervous because of me, I said. They're nervous because you told the market one story while the filings told another. Outside counsel exhaled. Then what do you need, Kelly? There it was. The first honest question all week. I need 3 things, I said. 1, an accurate filing today that reflects April's designation and the absence of reversal. 2, a board resolution that protects staff from fallout. No scapegoating assistants, analysts, or middle managers for decisions they didn't make. 3, a clear communication to clients acknowledging the transition will be handled lawfully, not cosmetically. Adam scoffed. You want a parade too? I turned to him. I want the truth on paper, the same place you tried to erase me. He pushed back from the wall. Why do you care? You're leaving anyway. That surprised him as much as it surprised the room. I hadn't said I was leaving. But we all heard it. I was already half gone. Outside counsel leaned forward. If we agree to your conditions, will you sign a targeted ratification for non-discretionary items? Payroll, vendor renewals, previously agreed client notices. Nothing strategic. That was realistic. Not everything should stall because a boy wanted a throne. I nodded once. Send the language. The meeting ended without shouting. That was almost worse. Shouting means people still believe force can fix reality. Paper either says what it says, or it doesn't. Back at my desk, I found 3 more messages from clients asking the same question in different fonts. Who is in charge? A junior I'd mentored pinged me on Slack. Are we safe? I typed back. Do your work, document everything. You're safe with your work. At 1:40 p.m., the internal newsletter, usually fluff about birthdays and charity runs, pushed a leadership update. It read like it had been written with oven mitts, an acknowledgement of April's acting designation, a promise to file an amendment, a note that, effective immediately, no new client commitments will be initiated without dual sign-off from legal and the acting managing partner. People read that twice. Acting managing partner. No one said my name. They didn't have to. At 2:05, Adam appeared at my cubicle, hat in hand energy disguised as swagger. Look, he said, glancing around. We can make this easy. You sign, I tell Dad to give you a clean exit. Bonus, glowing reference, whatever. Whatever, I repeated, looking at him. He was young enough to think deals were favors, not terms. Say yes, Kelly. No, I said. Say thank you. For what? For the quiet way I'm doing this. He didn't understand, which was the point. He left without slamming anything, which told me someone had told him to stop being loud. By late afternoon, the first public tremor hit. The merger partner filed a bland notice. Engagement under review pending governance clarification. Not a collapse. Not yet. Just a careful step back so their lawyers could breathe. Inside our building, it felt like an earthquake. I stayed until 7, answering only what I had to, drafting nothing emotional. On my walk home, the city hummed like usual. Couples argued about dinner. A cyclist cursed a taxi. Somewhere a kid laughed so hard it hiccuped. The world did not care about our filings. At my kitchen table, I fed the cat, opened my laptop, and read the draft ratification council had sent. It was narrow, as promised. Payroll, leases, utilities, previously noticed disclosures. I marked a few lines, asked for one clause, a sentence that would keep junior staff insulated from retroactive blame. I hit send. Then I opened a new document. Notice of transition and intent. One page. No venom. Just a calm sentence stating that once the filings were corrected, I would step aside formally, effective on a date that allowed for a clean handover. No surprises. No staged drama. The message was simple. I would not be the chaos. They already had enough of that. My phone vibrated on the table. A text from an unknown number. Are you happy? The screenshot attached was Adam's "All Mine Soon" post, now deleted. I typed back, "Be careful with captions. Paper lasts longer." Then I put the phone face down and let the apartment go quiet. Tomorrow would be the board meeting. A real one, with minutes and votes and names spelled correctly. My seat would be there. Not because anyone invited me. Because the law had. And I would take it, once more, on my terms. Saturday morning, the board convened in the largest conference room. Normally, those meetings buzzed with catered breakfasts and hollow laughter. Not this time. No pastries, no coffee, just a long table, a stack of papers, and faces lined with exhaustion. My nameplate was back. Not a gold plaque, not a throne, just a thin piece of cardstock that said, Kelly Anders, acting managing partner. It was enough. The CEO entered last, Adam trailing behind him. Adam's eyes were dark-ringed, his tie crooked. He had finally learned what panic felt like. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. We need to resolve operational authority. Until now, filings reflect Ms. Anders's designation in April. That has not been reversed. Legally, she retains control. No one interrupted. No one could. I let the silence stretch. They needed to sit in it. Finally, I spoke. I don't want your crown. I never did, but the truth belongs on paper, not in hashtags. And the truth is, I've held this authority for 6 months while being treated like a ghost. A few partners shifted, ashamed. I'll sign the transition today, I continued, on one condition: every junior staff member, every analyst, every assistant, protected. No firings to cover mistakes they didn't make. You want a clean exit? It starts with honesty. The lawyer nodded, already noting the clause. The CEO didn't look at me, but I saw his jaw tighten. He hated that I had the last word. Adam finally spoke, his voice small. Why are you doing this? You could ruin us. I turned to him. Because I'm not you. I don't burn things to sit in the ashes. I build and I leave when the work is done. The vote was unanimous. The filings were amended. My authority officially transitioned. But this time it was on record. Clean, correct, undeniable. My exit wasn't erasure. It was acknowledgement. When the meeting adjourned, I gathered my folder, stood, and looked around the room one last time. Take care of the people who actually keep this place running, I said softly. Then I walked out. Outside, the autumn air felt different, lighter, honest. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my cat purring beside me, glass of wine in hand. My phone buzzed with an email from a rival firm. Kelly, we'd love to talk. I smiled. Not from revenge, not from victory, from relief. Because the message of it all was clear. Thrones built on arrogance will always fall. But the quiet work, the steady work, outlasts everything. And for the first time in 15 years, the future was mine. Congratulations, your position has been eliminated. The words sliced through the boardroom like glass. The new CEO, Peter Mercer, leaned back in his chair, lips curled into a smug grin. Around him, the board members chuckled, some openly. others behind polite smirks. It wasn't humor. It was mockery. Me, Laura, head of corporate partnerships for 7 years, the one who had carried this company through 2 acquisitions, 3 near bankruptcies, and countless sleepless nights. They weren't just letting me go. They were enjoying it. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Instead, I let the silence drag long enough that even the laughter wavered. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a thin cream-colored envelope, and slid it slowly across the polished mahogany table toward Peter. "You might want to check page 1, I said softly, my voice calm but deliberate. "Where your investors learn I own 70% of this deal." The room froze. The chuckles died mid-breath. Peter's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" he scoffed, but there was a tremor beneath the bravado. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that invites warmth, the kind that never touches the eyes. "You heard me," I whispered. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the overhead lights and the faint shuffle of papers as one of the directors reached for the envelope with hesitant fingers. Peter snatched it before anyone else could, his hand tight, almost clawing at the paper as though the truth might bite him. He opened it. He scanned the first page. And then, there it was. The color drained from his face. His neck stiffened. His jaw locked. Hook number 1. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, watching as the realization sank in. He had walked into this meeting thinking he was the executioner. He didn't know he was the condemned. But let me back up for a second. This didn't start today. It started 2 years ago, when the company, Stratus Global Logistics, was a sinking ship bleeding clients and revenue. The old CEO, Whitaker, was desperate. Banks wouldn't lend. Investors had turned their backs. Employees whispered about updating their resumes. That's when I made my move. I brought in Horizon Ventures, a private equity group I had deep ties with from my early career. I brokered the deal that kept Stratus alive. I negotiated terms, secured bridge funding, and made sure every contract went through me. But there was one clause, buried deep in the paperwork, that no one but me seemed to care about. Horizon wasn't investing in Stratus alone. They were investing in me. For every dollar they put in, my name was on the partnership agreement. 70% of the intellectual property rights, 70% of the data pipelines, and most importantly, 70% of Pulse Track. The logistics software that had just transformed Stratus from dying relic to industry leader. I didn't brag about it. I didn't need to. I simply worked. Quietly, efficiently, while the others congratulated themselves on surviving another quarter. Until Whitaker retired last month and the board hired Peter. He was slick, the kind of executive who dressed sharp and spoke sharper, all polish and no substance. He strutted in on his first day like he owned the building. Within a week, he reorganized entire departments, slashed budgets, and paraded interns into meetings just to humiliate veteran staff. And today? Today was supposed to be my turn under his knife. "Effective immediately," Peter repeated, trying to summon his confidence back. "We're restructuring." "It's not personal, Laura. It's just business." Business. Always business. The irony made me want to laugh. I had anticipated this moment. For months, I had watched my access shrink, my name slowly erased from presentations, conversations halting whenever I entered the room. I wasn't naive. This was the classic playbook. Bring in a new face, discard the old one, and claim the wins as your own. But Peter hadn't done his homework. He didn't know I was the deal. That's why I wasn't panicking. That's why, as he sat there now, his hands shaking slightly over the document he had just read, I stayed perfectly calm. Hook number 2. "Laura?" One of the older board members, Mr. Hayes, cleared his throat. His voice was low, careful, as though he'd just realized he was sitting on a powder keg. "Is this accurate?" I tilted my head, feigning mild amusement. "Every word." Peter slammed the papers shut, but his pale face betrayed him. He wanted control. He needed control, but control had just shifted. 70%? I said softly, repeating the number like it was a knife. That's the share I hold in PulseTrack. The only product keeping your investors smiling, your clients loyal, and your stock alive. Without it, Stratus Global is worth what, gentlemen? A rounding error? The room buzzed, whispers darting like electricity. I stood, slowly, deliberately, collecting my badge from the table. You thought I was the employee you could discard, I said, letting the words hang heavy in the air. But in about 5 minutes, when your investors call you back, you'll realize something else. I leaned forward, eyes locked on Peter's. I'm not your employee. I'm your majority owner. Hook number 3. And with that, I turned, heels clicking against the marble floor, and walked out of the boardroom. Behind me, I heard Peter's voice crack for the first time. What have you done? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because he was about to find out. The sound of my heels against the marble echoed down the hallway, sharper and louder than I remembered. Maybe it was just the silence that followed me. The stunned silence of a boardroom realizing their world had shifted in a matter of minutes. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. When I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the time I stepped inside the elevator, I had 6 missed calls, 3 from blocked numbers and 1 from Rachel, the operations director. I smiled faintly. Right on schedule. The doors slid shut. I exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline ease through me. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I had been preparing for this moment for months. But still, knowing something and living it are 2 different things. As the elevator descended, I couldn't help but think back. 2 years ago, when Stratus Global had been 1 breath away from collapse, I was the one who pulled them back. I remember the night vividly. Whitaker pacing in his office, shirt untucked, muttering about payroll and debt collectors. He looked at me like a drowning man looks at the last piece of driftwood. We don't make it another quarter, Laura. He whispered, not unless we pull a miracle. That's when I made the call. Horizon Ventures. The partners still owed me favors. They didn't trust Whitaker, but they trusted me. They knew my work, my record, my ability to deliver. So I pitched it not as saving Stratus Global, but as investing in PulseTrack, the software I had built, nurtured, and refined for years. That night, while everyone else went home defeated, I sat at the conference table until dawn, hammering out terms. And hidden in those terms, clear as day, but invisible to those who never bothered to read, was the protection clause. 70% ownership of PulseTrack tied directly to me. I didn't do it out of malice. I did it because I'd been in the game long enough to know how quickly loyalty dries up when money's on the table. And today proved me right. The elevator doors opened to the ground floor lobby. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Employees who had heard whispers but not details stared openly as I walked past. I wasn't carrying a cardboard box of belongings. I wasn't crying into my hands. I was walking calmly, deliberately, the same way I had walked into countless negotiations. Except this time, I wasn't the one being negotiated. My phone buzzed again. I finally answered. Laura. Rachel's voice was tight, urgent. What the hell just happened? Peter's screaming, the board's in chaos. Investors are calling every 5 seconds. I cut her off gently. Breathe, Rachel. You blindsided them, she hissed. You can't just... Rachel, I said, lowering my voice. You've worked with me long enough to know I never walk into a meeting unprepared. They wanted me gone. They thought they could erase me. I reminded them who really holds the keys. There was silence on the line, then a sharp inhale. You actually did it. You tied ownership to yourself. I did, I confirmed. And Peter just discovered it the hard way. Another silence, longer this time. Then Rachel said, almost whispering, Laura, do you know what this means? Yes, I replied. It means the game has changed. By the time I reached my car, the first email had landed in my inbox. Subject line: URGENT, conference call requested. From Horizon Ventures. I opened it. Investors were demanding an immediate explanation from Peter about PulseTrack's ownership. A meeting was scheduled in 2 hours. I leaned against my car, scanning the email. A small satisfaction curling in my chest. For once, I wasn't the pawn being shuffled around the board. I was the board itself. But power, I've learned, doesn't come without cost. That evening, as I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Rachel, or Horizon, or some panicked board member. It was my brother. "Laura," he said cautiously, "I just saw something online. Your company, your CEO, it's all over the finance blogs." "Already?" I muttered. "News travels fast." "You okay?" he asked. I hesitated. Was I okay? The truth was, I felt strangely calm. But beneath that calm was something else, the sharp edge of reality. This wasn't over. Peter wouldn't go down quietly. Men like him never did. "I'm fine," I told my brother. "Better than fine." But even as I said it, I knew the storm hadn't peaked yet. Because Peter Mercer wasn't the type to lick his wounds. He was the type to strike back. And if I'd learned anything in business, it was this. The moment you reveal you're holding the cards, someone will try to flip the table. That night, just as I was shutting down my laptop, an email appeared. No sender, no subject. Just one line in the body. 70% won't protect you forever. I stared at it, my stomach tightening. The battle in the boardroom was only the beginning. The email sat on my screen like a shadow I couldn't shake. 70% won't protect you forever. No sender, no trace. Just a sentence sharp enough to feel like a blade pressed against my skin. I closed the laptop slowly, deliberately, as if shutting the lid would mute the unease creeping through my veins. But I knew better. Messages like that didn't come from nowhere. Peter had made his first move. The next morning, I walked into Horizon Ventures' conference room for the emergency investor call. The faces on the screen were a mix of irritation and curiosity. Some of them had backed me for years. Others didn't know me at all, only numbers on a spreadsheet. Peter was already there, pale but posturing. He wore a crisp navy suit, tie knotted too tightly, eyes darting like he was trying to control a room that had already slipped from his grip. "Let's be clear," he began, his voice sharp. "This company cannot operate with fractured ownership. PulseTrack must belong entirely to Stratus Global, not tied to one individual. It's reckless. It jeopardizes investor confidence." I let him talk. It's what men like him do best. When he finally stopped for breath, one of the senior partners leaned forward. "Laura, is it true? You hold 70% of the PulseTrack rights?" "Yes," I said calmly. "And I secured those rights to protect investors from precisely what you're seeing now. Mismanagement and short-term greed." Murmurs rippled through the call. Peter's jaw tightened. "This isn't protection," he snapped. "It's a hostage situation. She's holding the entire company ransom." "Hostages don't build the system that saved you," I replied evenly. "I didn't create PulseTrack to line my pockets. I created it to keep this company alive. And the clause you call reckless? It's the only reason Stratus Global isn't bankrupt today." Silence. Heavy, weighted. The kind of silence where decisions take shape. One of the partners finally spoke. "Peter, you knew about this clause?" He hesitated. "Too long. It was buried. Oversight." That was all it took. I watched the partners exchange looks, eyebrows raised, lips pursed. Oversight. The deadliest word in finance. The call ended with no resolution, but I'd won the round. Still, I knew Peter. He wouldn't lick his wounds and regroup quietly. He'd escalate. And he did. Faster than I expected. By mid-afternoon, HR called me. Not the usual polite tone, but clipped, rehearsed, nervous. "Laura, We've been asked to collect your company laptop and phone immediately. Standard procedure during disputes. I almost laughed. Disputes? Is that what we're calling this? The HR rep faltered. I don't make the rules. Of course you don't, I said, my voice firm. Tell Peter he can have my laptop when he pries it from Horizon's legal team. Click. I hung up. 2 hours later, I received another call. This time, Rachel. Her voice was tight, panicked. Laura, you need to know. Peter's spinning this. He's telling employees you manipulated the contracts, that you're planning to sell PulseTrack privately. He's poisoning the water. Of course he is, I muttered. That's what cornered men do. But people believe him, Rachel insisted. They're scared. Some think the company could implode if this fight goes public. I rubbed my temples. This was exactly his play. Turn me from savior to villain, shift the narrative until people forgot the truth. I don't care about rumors, I said. Facts win, contracts win. He can scream all he wants, but the paper doesn't lie. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Still, be careful. He's not just fighting for control. He's fighting for survival. Men like that don't stop at words. Her warning lingered long after I hung up. That night, I drove past Stratus Global's headquarters. Lights blazed on the executive floor. I knew who was still inside. Peter, probably pacing, shouting, making promises he couldn't keep. I parked for a moment across the street, staring up at the building where I'd poured years of my life. It didn't look like a place of innovation or growth anymore. It looked like a battlefield. And I wasn't naive. Battles like this rarely ended with just words. When I got home, another envelope was waiting. Slipped under my door. No postage, no return address. Just my name scrawled across the front. Inside, a single sheet of paper, printed in bold letters. PulseTrack belongs to Stratus. You can't fight us all. I sat down heavily on the couch, paper in hand. It wasn't a threat from Peter alone. It was bigger, coordinated. The board, maybe even outside players, circling like vultures. For the first time, the weight of what I'd done pressed against me. Not fear, exactly, but the realization that I had crossed a line there was no stepping back from. They thought they could erase me. Now they were preparing to destroy me. And the question wasn't whether I could stop them. The question was how far I was willing to go. By morning, the threat had a letterhead. A courier slid a thick envelope under my apartment door at 7:12 a.m. Outside counsel for Stratus Global. The language was surgical. Cease and desist. Temporary restraining order sought. Irreparable harm. Return all devices. No contact with investors. They accused me of commandeering company assets and clouding title to PulseTrack. I read it twice, set it down, and made coffee. Hook. Because this is where most people panic. I didn't. At 8:03, I called Maya Singh, my attorney. We'd worked together during the Horizon deal. She knew every comma that kept PulseTrack alive. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you still have the signed IP schedule, she said. In triplicate, I replied. And the amendment. Good, Maya breathed. Stratus can scream, but paper wins. Come in at 10. Bring everything. By the time I hailed a cab, my phone was a siren. Rachel, 2 partners from Horizon, 1 block number that rang 5 times, then stopped. I listened to Rachel's voicemail in the back seat. Peter's calling it theft. He's rallying the board. He says you're trying to sell PulseTrack to a competitor. People are scared, Laura. Rumor is a blunt instrument. Contracts are a scalpel. Maya spread the documents across her conference table like a forensic map. The Horizon investment agreement, the PulseTrack IP assignment into ArcLight Holdings, LLC, my SPV. Stratus's exclusive license back, conditioned on performance covenants, and the protective clause everyone had ignored. Control rights reverting to the inventor if governance changed in bad faith or if my credentials were revoked without cause. Maya tapped the clause with her pen. This isn't exotic. It's a key person protection wrapped in IP. They'll call it self-dealing. It isn't. Horizon signed. The board ratified. We've got minutes. They'll say it was buried, I said. They had counsel, she answered. And you gave notice when Peter started cutting access. We have that email, right? I slid a printout across the table. A time-stamped message to Whitaker and the board secretary 6 weeks earlier. For avoidance of doubt, Pulse Track rights remain with ArcLight. Stratus's license is unaffected so long as conditions are met. No reply, but red receipts lit like a Christmas tree. Maya leaned back. Okay, we filed 2 things today. A declaratory judgment action confirming your ownership and license terms, and a TRO preventing Stratus from defaming you or interfering with ArcLight's rights. We also send litigation hold letters so they can't lose Slack messages. Rachel said he's poisoning the water, I added. Employees think I'll pull the plug. Then don't talk, Maya said. Let Horizon talk. Investors hate drama. They worship certainty. Give them a plan that keeps clients safe. Hook, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stewardship. At noon, Horizon opened the investor call. Cameras flickered, faces arranged into neutral. Marcus, the senior partner who had backed me when Stratus was circling the drain, didn't waste time. Peter, he said, your counsel's letter to Ms. Hart contradicts our signed agreements. We are convening an extraordinary board session tomorrow at 9. Until then, status quo. No operational disruptions. Laura, can you confirm service continuity? Yes, I said, steady. Pulse Track stays stable. No outages, no leverage tactics. We protect clients first. A few heads nodded. Peter's jaw twitched. When the call ended, my phone buzzed again. Rachel, whispering from a stairwell. Check your email, she said. I forwarded you exports. If they ask, I'll deny it came from me. Seconds later, a zip landed. Slack threads. Peter telling legal to find an angle to invalidate ArcLight. An exec suggesting they float a story that I'd shopped Pulse Track to a rival. A screenshot of a draft press note. Former employee admits conflicts. Company reassures clients. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not fear, anger. I sent the package to Maya. Her reply was instant. This is gold. Preservation notice goes out now. If they publish that note, it's defamation per se. By late afternoon, the first blog post hit. Power struggle at Stratus. Who owns the code? It wasn't hostile, more curious than accusatory, but the comments were gasoline. Anonymous insiders, wild theories, recycled grudges. I closed the tab. I've learned not to read rooms where no one uses their real name. At 5:11, my brother called. Sis, want me to come by? You shouldn't be alone. I looked around my apartment. Clean lines, quiet, the hum of the fridge. Alone had kept me clear-headed this long. Still, I softened. I'm okay, but thanks. He paused. You always take care of everyone. Let someone take care of you, too. After we hung up, I stood by the window and watched the city fold into evening. I thought about everything I'd done to get here. Late flights, missed birthdays, the cost of choosing a thing that doesn't hug you back. I'd told myself the work would pay me in security. Now the work wanted me to pay again, with my name. Number at 6:02, Maya texted, Judge assigned. Hearing on Stratus's TRO is set for 8:30 a.m. We'll counter minutes later, a calendar invite from Horizon hit my inbox. Extraordinary board session, agenda, governance, and CEO performance. Start time, 9 a.m. Same floor, same room. 2 clocks, 2 rooms, 2 different kinds of verdict. Hook, because sometimes the only way out is through both doors at once. I spent the night building a single, brutal slide deck. No adjectives, just receipts. Signatures. Minutes. Code commit logs with my name 1,000 times over. A release schedule showing every revenue jump tied to Pulse Track updates. And one last page. A short, plain sentence. I will not weaponize what feeds our clients, but I will defend what I built. At 11:43 p.m., my phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. Peter's voice, lower than usual, almost tired. You don't have to do this, Laura. Take a payout. Walk away. I can make this go away. I stared at the wall, the weight of every year settling in my chest. I hit delete. Tomorrow at 8:30, a judge would hear his emergency plea. At 9 o'clock, the board would hear mine without me saying a word. The room that tried to end me was about to end him, or prove I'd overestimated my leverage. Either way, I wasn't blinking first. The courthouse clock struck 8:30 a.m. sharp when Maya and I walked into the hearing room. Peter sat across the aisle, flanked by two lawyers in tailored suits, papers stacked like shields. He didn't look at me, but his jaw twitched every few seconds. The judge entered, adjusted his glasses, and skimmed the filings. Stratus had painted me as a rogue employee holding the company hostage. Maya stood, calm and precise, and laid out the contracts. The Horizon deal, the protective clause, the board minutes. No drama, no theatrics, just the truth in black and white. The judge leaned back, tapped his pen, and spoke. The ownership rights appear unambiguous. Motion denied. Peter's head snapped up. His lawyers whispered furiously, but it was over. I didn't smile. Not here. Not yet. At 9 o'clock, I stepped into the boardroom. The same polished table, the same faces that had laughed when Peter declared me eliminated. Now, no one laughed. Horizon's partners sat at the far end, files open. The agenda glowed on the screen. Governance and CEO performance. Peter tried first. He spoke of vision, of unifying leadership, of mistakes in paperwork. His words dripped with desperation. When he finished, silence hung heavy. Then Marcus, Horizon's senior partner, cleared his throat. Laura, would you like to clarify your position? I slid a single page across the table. PulseTrack remains licensed exclusively to Stratus, provided conditions are met. But I will not tolerate sabotage, erasure, or defamation. I am prepared to withdraw the license if necessary. Gasps. Chairs shifted. The weight of that sentence was enough. Peter exploded. You can't threaten us. She's bluffing. She wouldn't dare. Marcus looked at him with quiet disdain. She doesn't need to bluff. We've reviewed everything. Laura holds the rights. You hid it. You lied. That ends today. The vote took less than 5 minutes. Effective immediately, Peter Mercer was removed as CEO. Security entered. The same scene as before. An arrogant man, now pale and sweating, marched out of the room he thought he owned. His glare hit me like a knife, but knives only matter if you let them cut. When the doors shut, Marcus turned to me. Laura, Horizon supports you. We want you not just as PulseTrack's architect, but as Stratus's steward. The board agrees. Effective immediately, we'd like you to assume the role of interim CEO. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, city lights glowing outside. My phone buzzed with congratulations, offers, interviews, but I ignored them. I poured a glass of wine and stared at the stack of documents on my desk. The same papers that saved me. They had tried to erase me, to humiliate me, to cast me aside like a line item in a budget. Instead, they taught me the most important lesson of all. Power isn't given. It's taken, protected, and defended. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I rewrote the ending. And this time, the ending was mine.